지금 지부기 안에 달바다 듬치기 먹고 덕투야 요 말에 내 아직 조금 매가지고 조금 지부기야 는 다바 듬치기 먹고 덕투 말 진짜 당보 맞아 조금 냠낸지 되니 지게 조금 제도 진로 그래서 어두시 그 생각이다 되니야 디고를 마시살래.
Good evening. So when we were last together a month ago, we concluded looking at the chapter on the meditation session. And there we looked at in particular the need to engage in both analytical and placement meditation, and came to recognize that if one solely engages in analysis, or if one only engages in placement meditation or calm abiding, one will not be able to attain liberation and enlightenment. Rather, both are required, both types of meditation are required. And looking at the meditation session, this chapter followed the first topic of the outline, which is how to rely skillfully on the spiritual teacher. So this then is where we are in the middle Lamrim up to this point.
된다 파여봐 맞는 님이 여봐 되네 뭐 소야다 그시다 곰다 되네게 제om다 조금 거 되네 그래서 소야 되게 되래 다 조다는 저 그시 다 람님네 제래 기위신 당보 곰야데 기위신 데서 곰야 되래 되네 니바데다 기부 중요한 일이 먹어야다 되네 기부 징게람 일이 먹으면 되네 기부 침벨람 일이 봐 곰야지 곰야 조디 곰냠네 바도 차고와 되네 자당 저 그시 잘 먹어 쉬려 되나 야장한테 재수기 제도 기회신용 검수도 검야지 가르라나 저 기회신이 바사다지 기회신이기 구소도의 연대된 가서 다 기신 때나 파여여 받아 마티나는 소소의 경우라고 받아 삼다 되네 기회신이 구소도의 연대된 제 안에야 기회신이라 대바지지도 오지네 다 검야지 검야지티를 검야지 대바지지도 다 기회신이라 대바배 숙치무 기약을 또 날래 대바대 검야 되네 기회신이 안으로 최대인제 기회신이야 랑리야 끝인치 부이 선비다 되네 라 기회신이 끝인치수 때문에 돈에 야 기회신이야 구바게 돼요 그시 구바 검야 돼 어때 검야 소이 디래다 기회신이 구성도 연대되네 기회신이라 대바지지도 검야다 근데 기회신이 랑리 최대인제 디게 끝인 지수는 끝인 침부시고 이 선배토네 되니게 삼다제 아니 그것이고 고면이 고면이 되다 기회신이 검세다 고면 做 디래다 고면이
Where we are in the text is we've looked at first several introductory chapters, then the first major meditation topic, which is how to rely on the spiritual teacher. Then we came to a general presentation in how to engage in meditation, and it was presented in relation to that one meditation topic that had been covered. Now, tonight we'll start on the trainings which are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. So these are a number of specific trainings. Later, this section will much later be followed by the trainings which are shared with practitioners of intermediate capacity, and thereafter will be followed by the trainings which are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity. So in this way, the Lamrim presents the sequence by which we need to train our mind. So what one you should have been meditating on for some time now is on how to rely on the spiritual teacher. Where one first calls one spiritual teacher to mind, imagines his presence around you, then reminds oneself of the benefits of relying on a teacher and the faults that will come from not relying on a spiritual teacher. Thereafter then, one recalls the many qualities of one's teacher, qualities in terms of his physical behavior, his speech, and his mental qualities. One reflects on his qualities in order to generate a deep trust or faith in one's teacher. Thereafter, the third part of the meditation is to reflect on his incomparable kindness with the purpose of generating respect. So therefore, the two key outcomes of the meditation on relying on a spiritual teacher is to develop a deep trust or faith in the teacher, as well as a deep respect for him.
기위신 된 차유제라 냠술레 나는 가르치는 곳에데 나는 마 냠술레 나게 될 순고래 제사들이 다 냠술레 나들라 아니 델야 당보 아니 냠보 구와시올 델야 아니 니발라 니세도와 대위 델라 닝보 랑위 칠도 꿀와당 닝보 지달림비 수유세 제사들 당보 대위 델라 닝보 랑 닝보 랭고리 세파 다저디 랭고르 디니 제고르다세 곰냐 냠는 제고르 닝볼미 꿀루 닝볼 렘바세 냠는 제바시고라다 다디 꿀루와라네 제고르 세파 랍지야디다 안데 디네 제세외절라나 냠는 간데 제고르세데 디니데 대외텔라 닝볼라비 칠도 꿀루와다 데네 닝보지달림비 수유세데 사 당보니 제고르
The process of meditation is a process where one habituates oneself to a particular way of thinking, so that it becomes very, very integrated, very much part of one's way of thinking. So now, so having meditated for a while on relying on the spiritual teacher, we now come to the second major part of the text. So our text doesn't present, the English translation doesn't present the numbers or the outlines, but we have finished a first big part, and now we come to a second, which is having, if you have the text open, either the handout on the first page or on chapter 6, page 59 of the published book, we come to the stages of training the mind once you have relied on a teacher. So we've looked at how to rely on a spiritual teacher, the benefits of doing so, the faults of not doing so, and the process of the meditation which leads to the generation of trust and respect. Now, coming to rely on a teacher, we start with the stages in which one trains one's mind. And the text, Lama Tsongkhapa continues, this has 2 points. First, an exhortation to take the essence of this life endowed with freedom, and second, the way to take its essence. Where Lama Tsongkhapa writes, this has 2 points. First, an exhortation to take the essence of this life. So that is this chapter, the 6th chapter. The translators have titled it The Freedoms and Endowments of This Life. And the second point starts with the next chapter, chapter 7, and thereafter. So this chapter, chapter 6 then, has 3 points. This has 3 points, identifying the freedoms and endowments, that's immediately below. And then over the page is contemplating their great value. And then on page 63 in the published book, I'm not sure on the handout, it's contemplating the difficulty in finding them. So this chapter has these 3 outlines which we need to come to know so that we can engage in meditation on them. Then the first outline of these 3 is identifying the freedoms and endowments. So translations you'll find elsewhere, instead of freedoms can be leisures, and instead of endowments can be opportunities. So freedoms and endowments, leisures and opportunities.
And 제가 다와던 조와선 지난 달로 알았나 가지고 최제의 냠는 제를 뒤수 여봐서 그래. 제가 배봐 뒤수 흘려봐. 지난 다와서 달와서 흘려로 주고 그래. 흘려로 주고 그래. 제가다 당하줄래 아줄이야 최 냠는 제기 빨래가 될라시고 지는 뒤수 매매매매제 최제 고급 여봐 흘려봐. 여봐들 달와서 저와라디 한 최제 냠는들 튀기 지 고야디게 수수 여봐들 저와서 저러서 디서 달와던 저와서 다고 지코런 게 대시로 지 돌리라 계신들이
Further, how to understand these two terms, freedoms and endowments. Freedoms, we should understand, or the other translation, leisures, means having free time or having leisure time. In other words, having time. This is the meaning of the word freedom, or the other translation, leisures. It means to have time or to have time. The second term, endowments, or translated also as opportunities, this means favorable circumstances that are required. So then to use the synonyms, identifying the free time and favorable circumstances.
제가 달와 달 소소기 최념는 제 고합이 뒤수여 봐. 저로서도 다 최념는 제발을 튕기는 거예요. 튕기되게 창조 봐. 그래서 최제의 고합 뒤수여 봐다. 최제의 념는 튕긴 차선 차와. 그래서 뒤수여 봐다. 튕긴 차와. 그거다 달저서도.
So these two together then, freedoms and endowments, these then are referred to having free time as well as having all the required favorable circumstances. So one both has the freedom to utilize this life well, as well as the favorable circumstances with which to utilize this life well.
달저기 리텐스도 당한주 리텐디 당한주 냠바치도 가서로 단주 뭐송와서 당한주 단주 리텐데 간치라 단주 리텐 바디 뭐신거 하고 그거 말봐 단주 리텐세 간치라기 매 하모고 디 하모고 봐 제산디 하모고지 다 되네게 단주 리텐디 되네 예첨보이 즉 예첨보이 바디 하모고지 지되는 한주도 신에 네 지게 낭매쇼도 그 지게 야부식 다고 야마토바다 야고 비시 당마토바지 지금 비시 매바는 차 당시가 변에 안들이야 셀 독도 주변에 안들이 셀인바 한 먹었네 내가 지게 셀인바 한 먹었네 셀면 뭐 맞춰 마신 바로 와 뭐다 맞춰 바로 맞춰도다 셀한 먹어도 디 비시에 당 마신지 딘다가 지게 네 비시 충분히 당진 조르고라 제사디 하고 간 되게 다디 지우 비시 당진 튕긴 지우 주요로 어디지 제사다 단주 뭐서 와서든 안줄이야 단주 율리테세데 간지 개침부인 바다 자 간지 레고요 차사데 바 데니지레 단주 율리데 다와선 데니지 레기레 조와셀 데니지 레기 제상 안주 율리딘디 다 다와다 조원이가 창되게 율리딘데 예세데 다 뭐저시에 데레데 다 단주 뭐서 와서 되순 거다.
There's a specific term which literally translates as having the physical basis of freedoms and endowments. So it's not always translated so literally, but it comes up quite often in Tibetan. One may just, for example, myself, I would translate this as just as one's life. But literally it's having the physical basis of freedoms and endowments. So Geshe is mentioning this to make the point that it's important to, as we see in this first outline, identify that what these freedoms and endowments are that we have actually achieved. That this physical basis or this life is marked by these freedoms and endowments. This is what we need to recognize or identify within ourselves. Because people who have achieved these freedoms and endowments largely have not recognized it, and recognized it to the sense of where they truly appreciate their value, this opportunity that having these freedoms and endowments present to oneself. The vast majority of people who have these freedoms and endowments don't recognize it, certainly not to the extent of where they truly value this opportunity and therefore will not let it go to waste. So an analogy that's often made is it's like someone, if they were to have gold bars, and they may recognize, yeah, I have bars of gold, and they go on with their life not putting those gold bars to excellent use. Of course, if they were incredibly wealthy because of all these gold bars, if they were to utilize those gold bars, their life would be transformed. But here, many people either do not recognize they have a stash of gold bars in their home, for example, or they see they have them, but don't truly value them. And it was as if they ignore them. They see them every day and just ignore them. So the purpose of this point, of this outline, is to come to recognize just what we have achieved so that we value it and put it to good use. Or as the translation says, take the essence of this life. Or another way you can translate take the essence of this life is fulfill the very heart or the very purpose of this life.
Dawa get on George that you leading in answer how go, but just a making answer. Yeah, the nature that you leading said the nature that you lead like such a like my son do answer how go, then is soon by the nail then answer how go to go, just a Wilson was said that you leading the laming answer. Yeah, my son answer how go at that you was said that you was said the nigger. How go ahead and Dalang Sunja, how go you by that you must want such that don't you put it down that you must want to Dondaro sick jiggy Donda New Chicavan, to be churching and to leading the church, go up here, the bata, and church, 2 inches and sound about it, and so how go at the then you must want so that.
This term identifying, it's a good translation, also can be translated as recognize. So Geshe is saying it means when you really come to know that you have something. So, for example, if you need something and you're searching everywhere for it, but it's right there in front of you, you haven't recognized that it's there, you can't put it to use. So let's say you need to write something, so you're looking frantically for a pen. It's right there, but you don't recognize it, you don't identify it. There is the pen, so you can't put it to use. But then when you see it and you recognize it, then you can utilize it well. So first one needs to recognize, and then through appreciating what one has, one can fulfill its purpose, its potential. So here, where we are in the text, is we've been meditating on relying on the spiritual teacher. Now we come to and thereafter came how to do the meditation. Now we come to the very first topic that the teacher presents. And the first thing the teacher presents is the freedoms and endowments, these qualities that we all possess. And therefore, independent on the teacher's presentation, we as students then come to recognize what we have achieved and value what we have achieved.
That is that Dawa said the Ganesh Legres and the Duba lesson, Duba said the San Dori Sumbi Dochile, the Duba said you're ready. And Duba le Dina the Carson Rosne, Chimgi Dudu Trova, Dumung Odang, Mihum Yebon, D. Dawa Tato Yes, on the Che Sumba, Tar Mihumba Jet and Java, dao se da sanji ki sunye do na la gar sun la sine chimgi du ju ro du me wo da mi kom ye bong di dao dao do ni se sun yo le ji la.
Now, looking at the text under the outline on the freedoms, so presenting what the freedoms are so that we can identify them. Lama Tsongkhapa starts with a sutra quotation from a verse summary of the perfection of wisdom. Through ethical discipline, the characteristics of the numerous animal births and the 8 unfree states are abandoned. Thus, you win constant freedom.
팀기 세대 추림 송화를 떼내서 추림 송외 또 비하는 추림 송외 추림 뒤에 가르치 그래서는 뉴저 좋아서 뉴저를 깨야지 이 말에 추림 연면 제가 추림 야고선 뉴저를 깨와 말에 이 말에서 뉴저 좋아 누마선다 뉴저라서 좋아 먹고서 그런데 좋아 그래서는 뉴저 이 말에 이달에 이 말에 냐와를 이 말에서 좋아 되네 근데 사체를 몰라서 받아 근데 지금 언돈 대솔이야 기 말이 미콤바 대솔이 기 말에서 그러다 네 팀기 수림 소외 냠는 제발라 때네 아니 냠는 게 dob기에 가르치기 말해서 뉴저 좋아 누명어와다 뉴저 좋아 저기 좋아시 누마서도 다 멍볼라서 바로바 누마 냐와 니 냐와 이다 아니 다 dun종어 송사라바 이다 되네 근데 다 체력 발라서 받아 아니 지게 되네 기 말해서 dun종어 당어서 얘네 미콤 바기에 쓰다 사실은 보다 안지게 미콤 바기에 다 거소래가 저기 유 타고서야 다든 지어도 되네게다 미콤 바기에 될래 얘를 끼게 말해서 미콤기 미게 뽕서 디바도 도시네.
Through ethical discipline or ethical restraint, the characteristics of the numerous animal births and the 8 unfree states are abandoned. So through ethical discipline or through ethical restraint, so this is the primary reason by which one does not attain rebirth in the lower realms of animals, spirits, or hell beings, nor as long life gods. So the primary cause that ensures one is not born in such an unfree state as these lower realms or as a long life God is that of ethical discipline. And then the other point to make is so we have unfree states. So this is the outline where we're looking at freedoms. So unfree states are states that lack freedom, whereas as we come to recognize here, we have attained freedom as opposed to being bound in an unfree state.
된다라 추림 염소림배 추림 야고 손저 추림 염소림바 냠는 제가 있나 미혼배니 예를 얘기 말해서 그러다 돈나디 얘기 말해서 하시 숨고래.
It's through ethical restraint that one is not bound in these unfree states.
얘네 다 미혼배니 예를 맞는데 가와기 그래라나 디세 추림 소마디서 추림 소마디기 한다 미혼배니 맞는다 가와기 그래라나 디 다와 따도니스 제산 댄주규리든 토그리스 뒤다 따돈 디산 다와 세데 다규리든 다주규리든 따도니스네 내게 디네다 다 주림냠솔렘베 디 제고 아니 지게 다주규리든 토그리스 해데 디 수림송아 냠는 제바 디 아니 다규리든 아니 뒤다도 디시 다규리든 니그리스 토그리스 그러다.
So it's an important point that it's through ethical restraint that one is not born in the unfree states, in states that lack freedom or lack leisure, but rather, where are you born? You attain constant freedom. So just to say here as a translator, where we are seeing this word freedom here is a different Tibetan word to when we almost always in other circumstances hear freedom. That freedom means liberation from samsara. This isn't the freedom that is referred to here, as Geshe says. So it's a different Tibetan word. As Geshe said before, freedom means having free time. So it's quite different from how when you usually hear the word freedom, which would mean liberation or nirvana.
데 다도 니에세 제 손바다 미혼바 제단 자와니 다오 시지다 당도 달와 세디 세디 간치라오스 미혼바 제단 자와인자 다와레스 미혼바 제라 제바이나 다 최제게 냠는 거 없라고 말해 뒤시 말라고 말해 제산 뒤시 매바레스 제산 미혼바 제단 자와인자 다 최제 냠는 제 뒤시 여바레스다 제산 다와 세디 미혼바 제단 자와인자 데라네 최제게 거 없여바인자 데라야 니 다와 세 미혼바 제단 자와들라 다와라 이래세
Remembering that there are two common translations. One is freedom, the other is leisure. So if one is born in an unfree state or a state that lacks leisure, one does not have freedom, one does not have leisure. And what does one require freedom for? Freedom for what? Freedom to practice the Dharma, leisure to practice the Dharma. So if one does not have, has not had good ethics, then one attains rebirth that lacks freedom, the freedom to practice the Dharma.
다 미곤바 제단 자와들 다와라긴 다 미곤바 미곤바 제데 가레스 다 미곤바 제데 디레스 된 거서 미곤바 제단 자와는 간치레 미곤바 라기레라나 다 미곤바 제데 디레스 마송야들이야 미곤바 제니에서 나 코로남시 미규위 유 타고프세데 유 타고블레 와다 지뒤나 유 타고프세데 유 타고블레 제나 다 미곤바레 네디어레스 미곤 예니 근데 코로나시 미규위 유타고다 제가 유타고블 지다다 즉 뒤제반 유타고세들라 미훈비네에서다 유타고블게나 최시에 그 과비어 말에서 제가 당 유타고를 맞게 완자 미훈바직리 자와 와자 제가 유타고세디 될게베나 최시에 과비어 말에서 제가 미훈바게 제가 단에 그 유타고세는 유타고블게나 최시에 과비어 말에서 제도다 요 말에서 다 미훈비네에 유타고세 미훈비네시리에서 유타고세데 간치라고 해서는 코로나시 미규비네 미규와 코로나시 메비가 유들야 안에 유타고라 그랬어지.
You've seen in the sutra quotation reference to these 8 unfree states from which one now has attained freedom. So one has attained freedom from these unfree states. So what are those 8 freedoms? So we start here in the published book at the bottom of the page. So the freedoms consist in freedom from the 8 unfree states. The first of which, among the 8 unfree states, the 4 unfree states of humans are living in a remote and savage land where the 4 types of followers of the Buddha do not go. So this is the first unfree state that we have attained freedom from. And that, again, having freedom means one has the freedom to practice the Dharma. Because if one were born in such an unfree state, in a remote and savage land, what would make a land be remote and savage is that the 4 types of followers of the Buddha do not go there. And because the 4 types of followers are not there, one does not have the freedom or the time or the opportunity to practice the Dharma. So the first unfree state that we have attained freedom from is being born in a remote and savage land.
파다마라 소바 디네게 시데라 코르남시 싱고르바다 디네게다 균에 사지데리아 지기 페메나다 유타고로 차고르데 페기메바나 다 넘윤 된자 슈바나 야고르 슈메바나 야시데 페기메바나 아직 안디더와 최시가 용고르와 지사 디네게 메나 디네게 사지데라 균에 디네 페 마베겐 사지데라 유타고세 디네리 지사 디 아니 미혼베네에서 미혼베네에서 최제 고가 매비기 사지들이 lumba 예디 차고 해줘.
The four types of followers of the Buddha can be understood as ordained monks and nuns and non-ordained men and women who are followers of the Buddha. So where there is a place where either they do not permanently reside or regularly visit, in such a place, or the people who live in such a place do not have the freedom to practice the Dharma because there's no practitioners there. So there's no ordained nor non-ordained men or women in this area who either live there permanently or regularly visit. So such an area those living in such an area lack the freedom to be able to practice the Dharma.
딜랍나 디기로 와서 비견 최신의 용시 오랄리 용루 왔네. 다디 다다 책임있는 선비에 삼로야 용시 와로 왔다. 말에 기나 가랍중 가야면 베미자 최신하는 용루로 와. 최게다 어디서 최진의 살랍신 디네에 디거라 인지미터 코런 디시메난 최요 말하는 가능성이 돼. 유타업 자기 말로 왔는데 예, 지게 최신한 데네라는 지게 건설업의 신기로 와서 배게 되네 더 완례식으로 왔다.
So a doubt that may immediately arise is wondering, so if there aren't any ordained people living in that area, but there are non-ordained people who know the Dharma, staying there or visiting there, is that sufficient?
데네게 최신한 용바래 돼 이나 당한 주게 냠리 림바디 마 추름미 냠네 바 시송 데네 마안 도시네 아주 가서 개와치마 하다미고 봐도 봐라 추름 냠네 추름소 와라 데네 미콤베게다 자기래 추름소 와라 데네 대줄리도 토그레세 대지가에 송송 데네 인자 델야 추름 유겐지게 추름 냠네 유겐지 마 최시 마 혼절에 추름 송줘야 돼 도시네 주름 거서 개인이나 개인이 또 만나 마 지게 건설 취념의 주름 송주야 냠네 제다 내내 돈에 깨워지마 안지 하나 미고 와 토백이 대주리든 토백이 탑람 띵한 거로 와다 지금 주름 마송행게 되네 제야 또 맞지 가요 옹말와 제자데 냠네 림바데 되네 냠네 림바데 가서는 되네 양서 주름 시소에 돈에 되네 마 냠네 림바지 쪽으로 와다 지자 되네 인사 디 과에디 임자로 있는데 이 당아질에 야네 김바 긴긴이 연나디고로 야네 랍중 연나리와 긴 랍중 가야면 최셰베는 돈버테스 가요 말와 진수름 소에 냠네 제라고 말와 아 제자 되네게 요번에 제자 코로나암시 세디 유타급 디면 유타급 차게 차단 간에서는 되네 요번에 마 돈바세 수름 냠네 제기 좀 라베요 디 냠네 제주네 되네 겨와치 마하다 미고에 토하기 두신 남가 티어요와 소수기 수름 소면에 되네 마 기나 되네 돈 바하면 콘솔레 돈 바테야다 되네 제시자야 가라고 말와 제자 냠네 제주야 요 말와 제자 유 상이기 냠네 최제 탈바 담지 김베 겨와치 마하다 미고바 토하기 최 냠네 제기 고갑디 네 라고 튕긴 상고 말하고 말와 디다 임전
As we saw in the sutra quotation, that the reason why one gains rebirth in a free state, a state where one has freedom to practice the Dharma, is because one has cultivated ethical restraint. Therefore, it's imperative that we continue to cultivate ethical restraint, which means for a place to be considered not a remote or savage land, requires teachers of the Dharma who in particular, who as a foundation, need to be able to guide others in the cultivation of ethical restraint. And as part of the guidance in helping others live an ethical life, it involves bestowing of vows, which means that the four types of followers of the Buddha need to be those who hold vows. So if in an area there are ordained people, then of course they hold vows and they can bestow vows to others. And if they are not ordained followers of the Buddha, but they are non-ordained followers, as long as they are holders of the lay vows, then they are suitable to be able to guide others in ethics because they can bestow the lay vows to others. So therefore, if an area lacks ordained people, but there are non-ordained people, that is suitable as long as they are vow holders, are holders of the lay vows, and therefore are able to bestow those vows to others.
And dine lenshing gukwa seja ondu shine. And dine lemba dine jige dang gukwa digi ne gukwa dan yanla dang nawalo soba matsang wongbo matsang wa. Da dor sik tui jeba na wongbo matsang wa se. Da wongbo matsang wa ne an nga jigi de wongbo matsang wa de ya jige chöji bi tunggen jigda dango mar me ba za de de takop se de takop ni ga so de takop sa 미콤바 세트 미콤바 제 최제야 지 렘바당 구바로 신나 내 최냐면 제두 말과 지산데네 자데 대안에 지금 다 가서 미콤베네서 채워 미콤바 세야 돼.
Then the second unfree state that we've gained freedom from, now I'm just going to change translation of one word here. So now number 2, being intellectually challenged or dumb and having incomplete faculties or missing body parts such as ears and so forth. So stupid is not such a nice word. It really refers to someone who's intellectually challenged as opposed to how we use the word stupid, and dumb refers to not being able to speak. So what this comes down to, the second one, is someone whose sense faculties are incomplete. So such a person then would not have freedom to engage in the Dharma.
네. 생아치다 생아치도 개왕아시서 레제다 권조 숨 매버 진비 lokdajen 다디 lokdajen 개왕아치 요 말에 레균도 요 말에 권조사도 요 말에 심비그 lok바데 lokdajen 디기네 어디 lokdajen 데이네 어디 안에 가서래 미콤바래 가서 디 lok다디 소수기래나
The third unfree state would be holding wrong views, and then illustrations of wrong views are given that misconstrue past and future lives, so in other words reincarnation, actions and their effects are karma, and the three jewels to be non-existent, in other words not believing that there is such a thing as the three jewels. So someone who holds such wrong views does not have the freedom to engage in Dharma practice because their wrong views prevent them from being able to do so. And then the fourth unfree state of humans is being born where no Buddha has appeared and therefore being bereft of his teachings. So this would be an area where the Buddhist teachings have not appeared because no Buddha has taught there.
네 사실 될라 취지야 고비어 말래고는 내가 지금 사실 되는 퇴행제야 취여서 파도지 로조진데 제에 되어 와양 그 지가 남자 제발 제벤 뒤로와 이네 오야 데니미 가서 원본 마서와 베 렘바동 구바 데니게 렌신 구바데 렘바시 카야 자마시 바 셈리안 지 랭이 남이 야고지 가리 야도디 하고 마도 데니게 렌신 구바 데니미 야고 마통하다 차 데니게 원본 차사마 상와로 차웨네 아직 데야 미콘바레 제산 아주 미네 데니시 미 렌신 구바다 원본 마상와제 미게 마통 암조야 마고 되게 데네스 지게看见这些我写嘛都些，那这三拿来两个那面切嘛都把那，这个练习古巴的去，古巴这，这那我的那个米呢，米热的呢，他确实个高都要买的是了，要买那个要买的是，但这个是叫我们去晒的要买的，那关键要买的，那晒的都是落大几的呗呢，两个都要买的，晒三单呗呢，那确实高要买的是米呢，米热的那确实高要买的是。哎呢，这个王伯车上唱话节，那落在这没那样，那个有的是呢，商业配买吧的，商业也干买吧，商业配菜呢，商业配买吧，那商业送药嘛是吧？该商业去送药嘛是吧？那商业配吧呢，商业配菜这起码商业一样去车上就把这个做菜吧呢，样商业就没有嘛是吧？就是今天商业干买吧，今天那个记得。뒤시 때려서 깨버리네. 야, 미콘 바레스. 미콘 베니 미레데 이나 최치하고 비어 말레스. 세상에서 뒤시 때가지고 밀용 거래. 미콘 바스 거래 제래.
So there are 8 freedoms. This relates, now we've looked at 4 of them, and these 4 relate to human beings. So having been born as a human, but being born in a border area, what we have here, remote or savage land, which it would be an area where the followers of the Buddha do not abide. So whilst if one is living in such a remote place, one can of course move from there. So it's not necessarily a lifelong unfree state. Then the second one is primarily if one has severe impediments such as being intellectually challenged, so it's really difficult to comprehend teachings and so forth, or difficulty with hearing or reading, then this too serves as to prevent one having the freedom to engage in the Dharma, or having wrong views, where because of one's wrong views, one doesn't accept the foundational or key topics of the Dharma, such as that there are Buddhas, that there is the Dharma to be cultivated within, and the Sangha jewel as well. And then foundational topics such as reincarnation and karma. Not accepting this prevents one from, or having these wrong views prevents one from engaging in the Dharma practice. Therefore, one does not have the freedom to engage in the Dharma. And similarly, if one is born at a time when the teachings of the Buddha have been eradicated, and the Buddha has not yet come and re-taught the Dharma or represented the Dharma in the world, then, this is the fourth one, then one does not have the freedom to engage in Dharma practice, because the Dharma practice does not exist in the world at all.
Then on the day that the Masa said, I'm Jamo Geshe Thubten Rabten. Then Geshe machine Geshe Thubten Rabten Sambigetan, Yunglu Atangane. The Dansan me Geshe like Tone, I'm Jamo and I'm Jogoya Sutuyada, and Jige Une Amju Unemone, Jilawi Dusine, Eagle up Jelo Shia Roda, Dasa Tushi Gaza Tunje Tone, the Negatone, Dusine, and Jignam regular water. Is that this one? Yama Diwana, the Nico Merwada. Merazad, the negative Tunjan, Jedem, make here with them on Masavat Bene, the Amjo, Jige, Mikmatonada, Amjo Moina, the nature of the Yamarwa. There's a Mikmaton, Yilo to a Jigdua, the Amjo Moada, Mikmatona, Yuloid, the negative, she had Tunjan.
What's quite remarkable is how some of these circumstances which prevented one from having the freedom to engage in the Dharma have been overcome due to human ingenuity, human intelligence. For example, there are excellent hearing aids for those who would otherwise be deaf. One assumes there are Dharma texts in Braille for those who are blind. So there are modern ways that some of these impediments can be overcome. But this certainly wasn't the case when the Buddha presented these teachings in the world 2,600 years ago.
네 라체릉 보세야 개베네 할레 개베네 라체릉 보세야 개베네 네 최시하고 말해서 그러다 뒤소야는 미혼베니 돼서 나선을 개방 나선되게 최제기 고갑 매비게 내 그 냐와다 이다 둔로되게 미혼베니 그래서 내려 최제고 고갑 당고마 요 말해서 나 라체릉 보세야 개베네 라체릉 보세야 되게나 미혼베니 될게 계속변에 최제고 고갑라고 말해서 자다 튕기에 참고 말해 주고 랑 뒤세라고 말해 뒤세용어 말이지. 세상에 미혼바. 나서 숨다 라체릉 보니 미마인 비기 미혼바고 미마인 비기다. 미마인 바냐와 이다 둔로다 라로서 봐. 미혼베에서 미혼에서.
So those were the four relating to humans, and Lama Tsongkhapa continues with the four unfree states relating to non-humans. The non-human unfree states are those of a hell being, a hungry ghost, and an animal, and fourthly, that of a long-lived god. So if one is born into any of these realms, or born as one of those beings, one does not have the freedom or the leisure to practice the Dharma. If one is born as an animal, a spirit, a long-life god, or a hell being, one then lacks the freedom or the leisure to practice the Dharma.
di gedan jawa dila ludin dila da danju lu da dayu dawa gedan jawa sede jesan dus chite da ngang zulya sosu da ngang zul ludin di dawa gedan de ludin re du minu sa samda we na dus samda na da ngang zu jige garsore dene garsore koranamshi me sege sajile geyo mara da ngang koranamshi yosai ruada 최시가 yosai 간주 가와 요래스는 간주 가와 끼려스는 최시한 여사 사지들이 끼려와 최시한 여사 사지들 요도와 제자다 유타업다 자와 간주 리된디 유타업다 자와 차기도와 단 원본 마상와서야 돼 뒤에 나 자와로 차상 다 기시시신 거랑 간주지 지금 원보셔서 상대로와 제자 유타업기 내들의 미콘바들의 자 되네 안에 원본 마찬가지게 타업돼 가서 그래 내들에 자 안되네 땅을 주게 가서 건조스 묘마래 준대요 마케왕아 지요마스 되네기 록다는 거 주길래 매로와 지난디 다 콤미콤베 내들 록다 정기 내들에 자나 상기 까매바대야 말에 땅을 주 디리캅라 가지고블라 다 상기 송 퇴야 요래 가지고 라메진이 지유제 상기 주 로아요 바다 퇴비 얌내지야 고비요 바자 예외가 매봐야 말까 예비 내가 그래더라다 아디디게 가지고 미미레 미인자다 가지고 미미코 비시들 자와래도 와대 자와래 가지고 리디네 당한서 그냥 뒤주는 말에 가서 그래 내는 냐 이다는 말에 내는 냐와 받는 말에 내는 가서 숨려 자유리되래 날 하는 말과 사마인자다 라세는 보여야 말과 제자대자 제도 something 가지고 리디디 다와 계단 가서 줘 그래서 미혼바 계단 자와래 제사 다와 계단 덴바 차려래
When we look then, now having had these 8 freedoms presented, we can recognize that we have achieved all of them. None of us here are beings of the lower realms, nor a long-lived God. And moreover, as a human being, we have freedom from the first 4 unfree states, in that we live in an area where the fourfold followers of the Buddha do abide. Moreover, the teachings of the Buddha does exist in our world. And then for ourselves also in particular, our sense faculties are sufficient that we can understand teachings, we can hear them, we can understand them, we can read and so forth. So we're not impeded by poor sense faculties. And lastly, we are not blinded by wrong views, such as being close to the concept of karma or reincarnation or the existence of the three jewels. So therefore, we can recognize that we can identify the 8 freedoms and recognize that we have achieved all of these 8 freedoms. So what this means then is that we all have the free time, the opportunity to engage in the practice of Dharma. Now Lama Tsongkhapa brings further explanation on that final freedom, that of being free of born as a long-lived God. So reading from the text, as for the long-lived gods, commentary on a letter to a friend by Nagarjuna discusses 2 types, those without perception and those in the formless realm. The former abide in one region of the 4th dhyana, great result, as if in a hermitage far away from a village. The latter are ordinary beings born in the formless realm.
Dushim meba said, Gawayore Labna, Ladi Gawayre, Ya something Shiba said, something Shiba de la that something Shiba said on the Chikayan, someday she would need Chambujo, Dinale, Yahab Lamas on the Yahab Tibetan, that Yahab doing years to a descent of years. Dina de Sajila, Jewichawa said, mean Sajdi, Tinedi, Mire, someday Shiba, Jewichawa said, Jewichawas near. Delia Deseniore. Ni Desen Debucho Jig the power public cancer can get Papa cancer. The Indian train in Jigandid. Then Dushim Meba said Delior that, like Dushim Meba said, Debucho in a cho jig like Dushim Meba said. That day, like Dushim Meba said, the choin the Debucho at the Kala Niore, Desenije, answering Nadini, she then you have Tiradi, dinner. The jigdi public answer can get Papa can get the Chuyam Jiguro public answer. Cho jig that Dushim Meba said the cho jig the Dushim Meba said you already. And the Dambodin share. Sucumless watch that sometimes Sambo Nibo Super Shiba said Yorova. Jedada Sucum something Shiba Dinalaya, Yandinia, Tibochewa, Michewa, Midua, Yanova Shin Tossen, get dear, dear. So that dinner the Tibochewa says, such a della. And dinale get either muscle in each year. She's a jigdy public as a jaja. Jigdy and Sosekibu, Dushim was at it. Did you read it?
So we see from the letter to a friend, it says there are 2 types of long-lived gods, those without perception and those in the formless realm. So those without perception are in the form realm. So looking at the text, the former abide in one region of the 4th dhyana, great result. So the form realm has 8 different sections. So within the 4th of those, that called great result, there are 2 parts. There's the larger part, which is populated by Arya beings. And then there is a small part tucked away in a corner, like a hermitage far away from a village. And this is where the long-lived gods abide. So again, within the form realm, within the fourth concentration or the fourth dhyana, there's this called great result. The majority of beings abiding there in the form realm are Arya beings. In this fourth concentration of the form realm are Arya beings, but there is a section within there which is populated by ordinary beings.
까마치기 뒤스로 되는 지레사 까마치기 뒤스지랑한서 미로 마선 로게타마 두고 알았어. 제상한지 미로 갸기 뒤스지려 건서 집에나 까마치 뒤스마도 말았어. 제상아로 까마치 뒤스지. 아 되네기 지도다 로 망무시고도 땅한테 미선 시월 체는 거 작으러 봐. 제가 다 체는 거. 내가 두시매 봐서 두시매 봐. 하죠. 내가 제가 되네기 당보 계속 선배 삼로지 매는데 삼로지 되네 삼로균에 매도다 최시에 균에 거 매러다. 최근에 삼코고만 안 마음반다 시로지도 갑래 지대 다리에 당아 시설을 선배게 이제 기여도 안에다 가서래 되네 삼로디마도 고고만 제산 디바라도 로마 오셔도 되네고 니마 스님 사지게 차상 조 스님 사사게 조 사지 되네 개와사바 마사바 되네게 지산 델레하델이야 두시메 버리에서 지난 될 라체링 보래서 지난 될이야 최지야 고고요 말해서 다 미콤베 헤이 미콤베 네세 디소모레 네. 나도 종배다 시사에서 비 다리가 하고 거래 마신이야 마신이야 되는 다시에게 딱산지 리거 당한 시사에서 비 리거래.
So the reason they are called gods with no perception is that how it's worded? Yeah, that they are without gods without perception is because they have no thoughts at all beyond the recognition I have been born and then I'm dying or I've died. So between there, which is normally the period where one would engage in Dharma practice, they have no thoughts. Their mind is completely still. There is not a single thought. Therefore, they do not have the freedom to practice Dharma. Beyond the recognition of I have been born, I have died, between there is not a single thought, which means they do not have the freedom to practice the Dharma. And so whilst this is their situation, also being a long-lived God, they live for an incredibly lengthy period of time. So what we would consider the maximum human lifespan, say 100 years, would just be a single minute in their lifetime. So there's incredible long lifespan with no thought, no opportunity, therefore, to practice the Dharma. So all they do is waste time and exhaust merit. So this is why this is a rebirth that lacks freedom, because one lacks the freedom to practice the Dharma, because one has no thought or no perception.
지산 두시 메바데 계속선 배 삼로 코롱 탈바 토송선 거르시 탈바 다 코롱 탈바 토생한지 대주 탈바세 저라 탈바 토송선 거르시 코롱게 다 탈바 토송선 거다 코롱네 탈바 토레선 거라다 더 트위데로 와 지산 다시 얘기 시대에 포함도 안에 가져왔는데 다然后메바 시에 리에도 탈바 토 메바 하고 거라 야당아 탈바 토 메도 다 탈바세 자오기네 여사 말해서 록다기 거래지다 얘네 록다기 탈바 민두 와서 탈바세 민두스 록다기지 얘네 아니 록다기도 탈바 메베기 록다기도 디버치면 시우사 제가 되는 신에 그런 거길래 something wishing you get Yamje, and she did Menma, Nyawan Maki.
With these gods, what is particularly common is when they take rebirth in this fourth concentration, they think they have attained liberation. They have that thought when they are born, and that's it. Then they just abide for this incredible length of time with no thought. Then when they die, then they recognize they have not attained liberation. And now anger arises, as if they have been deceived. And now dying with anger, they almost certainly will end up being born in the hell realms.
That the nigga dushimeba yele yuchukura, yuchukura. That's some yamling got a chevalet and dushimeba kigore said that you got a lab do. Tangazo deva, the big tenlia, she near troop, she near topside, she near topside. Then she need any other debigeda. Debil ma ji rakwa debi nyomo balya debi nyomo bala gyenta and mi debi ge longje chasang la gyenta dile la ba ne ya and something is digilya and ji cherin wa da ne na zu nywa yuden da ji du shi ne gom jung wo shin yom ji to go go de jini ju dine wo shin yom ji top dine something shi bi wo shin yom ji top sa da di top sa de koron ge gar sam go ra ne da di taro to ye yu je de koron ge 타로토야라 가르고 무슨 되네 제지비게 미신의 톱자 something 오신 톱차네 되네 기다 제바 제게 삼로차산 남도레스 제산 디차산 가고다 삼로차산 가가가 고두스콤 제네 삼로 가르게베나 마까지 가야 삼로 코라에 매바시 수여시네 곰지 되고 왔다 거의 이기 셰바 참모지요래 마도 셰데스 왕시 암조고야다 차산 셰바 차산 락바 차산까지 오늘 기름 맞춰서 차상가 진데네 다디 타로토의 유리에 선비게 도 제는 검 주고 왔다디 다디 가야 제바 가야 삼마다지 도 신디고 주고 그러지 델레 두시미비 염죽라고 왔다 디 검용도 디 검비게 때 그런 거 가르치고 왔어 다디 검에 야고래 디 초도 요바 다디 타로토의 람 냠린 디레 선비 삼다지 때 그런 거디 냠린데 타비 토베길 람냠네 임바디 너추주 추이제네 마임바지를 임바삼다 두시다 디곰바이나 타바토의 유리 지산 디도 공부할 때 야보래 선배 다 디자냐 곰지는 다셈 가르게바나 파고 띵이지 신이 또기 파가가가 다셈 쳐서라고 치단 가요도 디네 암졸이야 냐를 거를 거야 메데니까 주도 그 누가메 가요 말아 자고로 또 곰지네 두시메 비님시데 또 제팅이지는 곰 되고 왔다 되네 도서 곰지 되네 곰 디 제부 뭐데 시도디 아니 다지께서디 두시메 비님주 두시메 바세데 기고래제 되네 기여도 탈바 토소 왔음 거래 되네 삼도 가야메 바제 잡네데 되죠 너무고데 디기다 예마 두시메 비님주 곰비기 제부래다 되네제 안 되네 거에다 지리에 포함이 되네 탈바민도서 록다게 누스진 용거래 제자다 두시메 바게 규디가르스네 당 워시네 줍 가서 되베 대야 시네 줍 산에 삼된게 되베 녀모바 락바디게 원주와디게 파빵 삼된 용워신임주 톱 내는 워신임주 톱이 디 대내다 야 안지 심 온도교 심 락바 차사 가치네 이시님시 참모점 저마도 매바 차사 가시네 두시는 공자 슈부거래지 니 공비게 제보데 두시바바데 기거래지
Just before I come to what Geshe said now, just to say on the translation of this word perception, because it's one of these words that is translated correctly in many different ways, and not necessarily mistakenly. So it doesn't, some translators use the word perception to mean like a direct realization. It doesn't mean this at all. In the context of the mental factors, it's translated as discrimination or differentiation. And in this context, it can be understood as thought. So when you see the word perception, and you used to perception meaning something else, you right here already take it as thought, or you could take it as in terms of the mental factors that of differentiation. So when it says here, those without perception, rather understand this to be those without thought. Now to what Geshe said. So how do these beings come to be born in this part of the fourth dhyana? Well, in the previous life, the life previous to that rebirth, they were in the desire realm like ourselves, and they cultivated calm abiding. And when they cultivated calm abiding and experienced the pleasure or the happiness of physical mental pliancy, they saw the coarser, the general way of thinking or the general mental state of the desire realm as being quite coarse and unpleasant, and gave rise to the wish to develop an even subtler form of concentration. And here they started to give rise to the desire or the wish to attain the, again, it's usually translated as bliss, but it should be understood rather as happiness. The happy, because it's the same word. So bliss or happiness of the varying levels of the form realm. So they are a desire realm being who has developed calm abiding and is now aspiring to develop the minds of the form realm. So the various dhyanas, they're aspiring to develop those because they are much more blissful and far happier mental states without the coarse roughness of the desire realm minds. And so not only are they do they have the wish, the desire to develop these, as maybe you could say, subtler consciousnesses of the form realm, which are much more pleasant, but they see this as the path to liberation, because they're recognizing that the various consciousnesses of the first concentration, the second concentration of the dhyanas, the third dhyana, etc., they're recognizing that these are far more blissful, far greater happiness is experienced. So therefore they see this as the path to liberation, because ever greater happiness is being experienced. And when they get close to the attainment of this fourth dhyana, this without perception, without thought, they think that must be liberation because there's no thought. And they strive to achieve that, and they do. But so when they then take rebirth, they die in the form realm, in the desire realm, and take rebirth in this fourth concentration, this fourth dhyana, they think then they have attained liberation, because now they are free of thought. So beyond the recognition that I have attained this rebirth, I'm now liberated, they have no further thought or perception. They're still alive. There's consciousness that is present, but it's a very subtle consciousness, and it's too weak to be able to hold coarse thought. Hence, when they attain this state, they think liberation is achieved. But this whole process, from their attainment of calm abiding throughout their progression through the dhyanas, has been motivated by a wrong view, that this is the path to liberation. Whilst they are achieving higher levels of concentration as they move through the dhyanas of the form realm, and they are thereby experiencing ever greater levels of bliss, as we see, they end up taking rebirth in samsara, remaining bound in samsara, and are not at all progressing towards liberation.
Chimani sume do kipi soso soki was chisa la chirwa sede sume la dilea papi kansa ta soso kibu ane je nyungo re papi kansa re ane soso kibu ta soso kibu dilea yang chi cholam na cholam lam gaya gule ma kiwa je yungruwa ta cholam ro je yungruwa ta cholam yena mena cholam yungruwa dinegi je yonsigire ta dine enjada delea chima sume be kansa de la papa dan so ki ni je da bo ni ye wa xin na sume kansa de la pape kansa je so ki ni yong re je ta sume kansa so ki bu de la yang cholam ba yong ru wa papa ma de cholam ba lam nyam len ki le ki de yo wa an ju cholam gi ne lam nyam le gi ne je ma nyong an de ne ge nyam le je ma nyong sume ba so ki bu chung ru wa 초람 바용 그래 초람 바 멤버 초람 줄에 냠는 준에 제 만용을 소소기 뭐 소매 봐요로 와 어디서 제가 다 치마네 수미 초람 남바로 라 남바다 때 유시다 남바 용을 남바 멤버다 단 남바 치바세데 얘네야 남바 치바세 기시야 이 남면 이 말에 근데 남바 치바세데 가는 저기 좀 되기 더네 지금 그거 봐 주멜레디 기시야마 요 말에 그래서 이제 주멜 제가 수코를 막 기시야 코를 암조가 하셔 말와 제가 되니게 수메 비간사 소소기부 람냠는 이제 만형게 이제 소소기부 여러와 그래서 안에 가서래 미혼바 가서래 라체를 보세요. 제가 계속 가서 체를 뭐 쉬우래 이내다 최제 곱기네 매래 가서 최 순간 매래더라. 최 순간 매라 가서 나 암조고야 매라 최 순간 매래 안 최 순간 매도 그러서 최 냠는 제 매래 거기서 신고 말다 냠는 제 매래 다 파베 강사들랑 초람 귤에 끼는 이게 그러서 귤 남여로와 거기서 신고로와 냠는 제 쇼로와 거기서 신고로 얘마 맨되발마 냠는 제제 냠는 똑보귤에 끼제 얘네 수밀에 끼려면은 권주게 권주 똑보귤에 여봐서 권주 공부로 공부하게 다 냠는 제 여로와다 그 최년에나 다들 되는 최년에 제 만용은 소소기부 수밀 소소기부 줘로와 다 권주 공부에 권주 똑보면서 공시해요 말와 다 최랍칸요 말와 그래서 나 요말 최 년에와 최시에메 그래서 년에메로 암조메로와 수요 말와 진짜 되네자 대소는 되는 수면 소소기고 남귤에게 만용한 소소기고 되게 다 체능 보래 될 게와는 주지하고 요 말해서 오다 기위 소기라도 솔럼베도 소기레데 되게 솔능이 소기 나랑이 요한 이치워 디나도 소기라도 에요한 이치에 솔람 귤에게 되는데 다 미콘바 차고만 호라 남귤에게 공지하여 다 냠는 균이 매대간 되게 다 미콘바에서 최제하고 오면 말해서 제자 파고디 수메데 파바다 소소기고 디센이체 소소기고 되려 솔람 귤에 유연치네 메간이 이체다 솔람바 귤에게 매당은
Then continuing, the latter are ordinary beings in the formless realm. So that we had here that they are long-lived gods, and there are two types. Those without perception, which we've discussed, so they are the ones in the fourth dhyana of the form realm, and then those in the formless realm. So that's, now we will look at those in the formless realm. We've just looked at those in the form realm. So those in the formless realm, the latter are ordinary beings born in the formless realm. So in the formless realm, there are beings who are both Arya beings, so those who have directly realized emptiness, and those who are not Arya beings, in other words, ordinary beings, those who have not realized emptiness directly. So there are those two types. And of those who have not realized emptiness directly, there within that type, there are another two. There are those on the path of accumulation, so those who have developed a path within them, and those who have not developed a path within them. So those who have not developed a path. So those that are being referred to here, the latter are ordinary beings in the formless realm. So being ordinary beings, it's not referring to the Aryas. And amongst the two types of ordinary beings, the non-Aryas, it's not referring to those who have attained a path. Only those who have not attained a path at all, but have attained rebirth in the formless realm, are considered long-lived gods, who have attained an unfree state, who do not have the freedom to engage in Dharma practice. Both Arya beings and ordinary beings who have attained a path, who are born in the formless realm, can continue their meditation. They have sufficient Dharma knowledge and realization to continue their meditation in the formless realm. But those who attain rebirth in the formless realm, but have not cultivated a path, not having form means they cannot hear teachings, they cannot read. So therefore, if they cannot be taught and guided, they do not have the freedom to engage in Dharma practice. And again, whilst other beings in the formless realm also do not have form and therefore cannot hear, but they have sufficient Dharma knowledge and realization that they can continue their spiritual development. So those who are considered long-lived gods, in other words, who have not attained freedom, the freedom to engage in Dharma practice, are those ordinary beings who have not attained a path because they cannot hear teachings and therefore cannot be guided in the Dharma.
dawa gedan jawa de re mendo samda ba da nga zo dawa gedan jawa de re du ka sa ju mi ko ma ne gedan jawa dawa gedan den ba cha ge wa dawa gedan den ba de cha ge je san dawa ge chang wi lu den cha de ne chang sa da o da nge lu den de ne gi dawa ge chang de gen mi ko be ne gedan ja sha je sa da dawa gedan cha wi den de san be ge 하고 이제 수수나 어당에 리딘데 배 야구래야 선배게 야구 임바 디텐들 양이 냠내지 튕긴 차선 사디게 리딘 레도와 선배 삼다제 안 삼다네 안다 텐델이야 수수기 안 냠내 강투도 지기 제가 미군 변내 얘기를 하고 와제 제가 네 대술을 깨봐이나 안에 아주라 가르치고 그러세네 제 취지에 고합라고 말 미드 미군 받자고 그래 최근 다와 요 말했다 미군 받자고 제가 뭐 봐이네 네 델레 맞게와 지인 선배게 네 델레 맞게와 지인세 자 제가 네 델레 맞게와 데 가르치고 그러선 되지 가들이야 또 나를 손받는 수림 때문에 지역을 수림送过그래야지 수림送하나 델 다와 게다디비 가서래 대단 자야지네 다도 다유 때문에 이게 송하노 제사다 디네 장에 미콘번에 되는 마기비 쳐도 근데 그디네 다와 기에데 미기죠 루틴이 기도와 지기 제사 디네 자 미콘번에 얘기나 네티다 마음바나 마기에 답람래야 다른 수림 소야 되래서 디네게 수림 소야 이 제사다 된델이야 지 최지하고 거의 예비 디네자 된디 야후주인바데 배셔 다제 된디들 양의 냠는 지인 세배 당한 쪽에 다 전주기에다 인도기와다 디게 게 통하는 냠는 제고래서지 다스 나디 송거래 예자 당한 쪽도 삼수스다데 당한 쪽 루틴에 배 야구를 찾아서 소소보기와다 다 야구인 알레데 디르바 당한 지기 미저신 제 소소 지게 미소 망고이야 직도도 갑로 소소기 직견체로 나 둘로 빼직 공르나 첨보지 여배는 소소기 들려야 따스다진 잔다를 받는 잔다들 등에디 야구 쉬야 삼서 저로 받아 지금 뭐라이나 빼 야구를 현대 뭐라 망고님들 니 컨디션 등에 뭐라도 야구이 앞에 야구이 선비 소소기 다 자침 제저로 와 어디나시 당한 주기 눈로다 냐와다 다들 미군 변내디 바도신 삼다 하고 해도 당한 주기 된디다 빼 야구를 해도 와 선배다 디 야구를 해야 선배 데려야 아니 지금 소소라는 게 소소라야 야구레샤 선비게 네 도신 삼다제 한 보기에다 당이 된들이야 한 주님은 고요 받들이야 다냠는 배제디 야구 나도 냠는 지긴 선배 삼다제 아주 다냠는 지 뒤버기에다 아니 데들이야 지게 배제시 냠는 전주시에기 다디도 날이야 아주디 다와기 거서 어쩌지고로 지상하는 삼다에 데리다.
So we'll conclude then here tonight. So just to mention then how to meditate on this. So the way to meditate on recognizing or identifying that we have attained freedom from the 8 unfree states leads us to the point where we recognize we can practice the Dharma. We have not been born into one of those unfree states where one does not have the freedom to practice the Dharma. We have the ideal physical basis to practice the Dharma. We have achieved all 8 of these freedoms. unlike so many beings. And this is where the importance of the meditation comes in, because to recognize that we have attained these 8 freedoms, this you've already done. But where the meditation serves its purpose and why we need to engage in this reflection and again, is to value, firstly recognize what we've achieved and thereby value it. Because we think, oh, so many people have achieved what we have. But that really is not the case. By reflecting on these points, we need to come to the point where we recognize just what we've achieved, how incredibly fortunate we are, so that we no longer take it for granted, seeing it as ordinary, but rather to recognize what we have as extraordinary, and thereby value it and utilize it well. So, for example, if someone has someone who walks, we tend to walk through society thinking of ourselves as just being like everyone else. But there are some people who walk or move through society thinking they're quite special because they drive this fabulous car, they dress really well, they have this attractive physique, and they'll move through society feeling they're quite impressive, they're quite special. So here, when this meditation is done well, we come to recognize our physical basis as being, or the Tibetan literally is our body, as being our physical basis, is something truly impressive because of what we can do with it. So we need to come to the point of seeing how amongst the wide variety of beings, what we are, what we have achieved is quite impressive. Therefore, we need to utilize it well, to recognize how fortunate we are and value what we've achieved, not taking it for granted. And how not to take it for granted? What we saw right at the beginning here, the quotation from Sutra. We've achieved this independence on ethical restraint. Therefore, generate your determination to cultivate an ethical outlook, a mind that's restrained from coming under the influence of the afflictions, a determination not to bring harm through our physical behavior, our way of speaking, or even our way of thinking. So this is the outcome to come to, this determination, this ever greater determination to live an ethical life, to cultivate one's mind so that it is ethical. Why? Because we value and appreciate what we've achieved and want to ensure that we continue to do so. We'll conclude. So thank you. We'll conclude there for tonight, and tomorrow we'll look at the endowments, which are the 2 divisions: those pertaining to oneself and those pertaining to others. So we'll look at that tomorrow. Then thank you very much.